Well, thank y'all for coming out. We're recording this, so I'm going to kind of start from the beginning. This is the Caddo Wildflower chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas, and this is Tuesday, May 24th of 2022. And I want to thank publicly Bill Hopkins, who's helping us right now. You see Bill right there. He's our, I call him the IT guru of the Native Plant Society of Texas. He was our longtime webmaster. Are you still, you're not the webmaster anymore, are you, Bill?
No, I'm not the webmaster anymore. That Stephanie Long is our webmaster now.
But long time, still our guru. He's our go-to guy. And also our executive director, Meg English. These two took time out yesterday morning to sit down and have a mock Zoom meeting with me in my kitchen to go through, make sure all the hardware worked, and that it held my hand, made sure this was going to work. So we're now in the 21st century with this hybrid meeting. So, you know, we're moving forward. Okay. But I want to go ahead and get our speaker introduced. Our speaker tonight is Ben Pfeiffer. Ben is the founder of Firefly Conservation and Research at firefly.org, a nonprofit dedicated to the firefly conservation and education. Firefly.org is currently the most visited website about fireflies on the internet. And if you haven't been there, you should go because it is chock full of really great information. Ben is a well-known public speaker and science educator whose research focuses primarily on Texas firefly species and is working to document the diversity of fireflies in the state, as well as their natural history, including their life cycle, preferred habitat, and unique flash patterns. His research is helping to illuminate much of the previously undiscovered information about the state's incredibly rich firefly diversity so that others can work to preserve and enjoy it. He is a member of the International Union of the Conservation of Nature Firefly Working Group. He recently completed the Red List Extinction Risk Assessments for Texas Firefly Species, which was published in May 2021. Ben studied biology at Texas State University and is a certified master naturalist. He is a lifelong sixth-generation Texan and has spent most of his life working to understand Texas ecology and its unique diversity. So you guys welcome Ben. He's going to talk to us about fireflies.
Thanks, guys. Good to present to you remotely tonight from New Braunfels. Like Belinda introduced me, my name is Ben Pfeiffer. I'm founder of Firefly Conservation and Research. It's a primarily nonprofit, and it's basically an organization that furthers firefly conservation in the state of Texas, and also helps me get word out in terms of firefly research that I do here in the state. So let's talk about fireflies. So what are they? Fireflies are beetles. They're not flies. But they go by many different names in Texas. You might know them as lightning bugs, fireflies. Sometimes there'll be that glowy thing over there. Whatever you call them, at the end of the day, they are beetles, and they're in the order Coleoptera, which is a really diverse group that contains around 400,000 species worldwide. All fireflies belong to what is called the family Lampyridae. And fireflies in the family Lampyridae share several shared characteristics. As adults and juveniles, they all bioluminesce. They also have relatively soft, elongated bodies. We sometimes call these squishy beetles. If you ever held like a really hard beetle, you'll know what I'm talking about. With fireflies, they're relatively pretty soft and can be damaged easily. They have a flattened shield that covers the back of its head. Off to the right of the screen, you'll see where my pointer is, you'll see a firefly, and there's kind of an orange and yellowish colored head shield, and that's called the pronotum. So during the presentation, I might refer to the pronotum, and this is what I'm referring to. And so that head shield's usually large and contains colorful markings. It can be yellow, yellow, tan, red, or orange, and a lot of times it has a black spot. As the firefly in the right-hand corner, you'll see that it has a kind of a black splotch here. This is helpful, and I mention this because as firefly scientists, it helps us to ID the species specifically sometimes based on that marking on the back of its head shield. Most fireflies are around 5 to 20 millimeters long. To put it in perspective, about a 5 millimeter firefly is about the size of a grain of rice. So you can think about it that way. Whereas a 20 to 25 millimeter long firefly is about an inch long. To give you some perspective, down in South America, they get up to 3 to 4 inches and sometimes larger. And so that's a really big firefly to come across in the middle of the night. So this image here is showing some firefly anatomy. And this is just helpful so you just know what it looks like and what the major parts are in case you find one at night and you're wondering if it's a firefly or not. Recently, I was in Mexico on vacation and I came across some beetles that ended up in my room actually. And I thought at first that they were fireflies, but what it ended up turning out was that they were firefly mimics. And they were in a different, completely different family. And so by knowing kind of my basics on firefly morphology, I was able to kind of figure it out. But fireflies basically have 11 antenna segments here. They have relatively pretty large eyes, especially the males for seeing females. And those eyes kind of telescope in and out of this head shield here. That black spot I referred to on the back of their head is called the pronotal spot. They have what's called a scutellum, which is kind of a hard bony plate between their head and then the rest of their abdomen. And sometimes this can be colored differently. It can be black, it can be yellow, it can be both. And so that's something that we look at. 6 legs. They have they have wing covers that are called elytra or elytron. And then some species also have what's called an elytral margin. And what this is basically, sometimes it's colored differently in certain species. And so this can be helpful for us when we're studying it really closely. Sometimes it's really well defined. Other times it could be kind of blurred around here. And these are just things to look at when we're trying to study fireflies to ID them. On the screen here is a photo of 2 photos of a female firefly and a male firefly. Most people can ID a male firefly, but fewer people see a female firefly more often. And automatically you can see some differences between the two. The female off to the left, she has 1 light organ, and she has 1 spot here, whereas the male has 2 light organs. Now, it kind of makes sense why this is. Males are flashing to females and trying to be seen as best possible, whereas females basically have to conserve energy to lay eggs. And so they don't need as large of a light organ as the males do. And in some cases, it can be really small. And they can tilt their abdomen in the direction of the male that they like to flash to. So firefly diversity in Texas, we've got around 2,000 species worldwide, 180 species here in the United States, with probably 20 to 30 unidentified species. There's 45 species in Texas. This includes diurnal species and then also night flying species. And then I kind of lump into there a few that are probably unidentified. So we have an incredible amount of diversity. To give you some perspective on this, Florida has around 50 species, whereas Georgia has around 40 species as well. So we're in the top 5 of firefly diversity states, and that makes it a wonderful place to study and also live in. So this chart off in front of you will show the firefly life cycle. What most people don't know is that fireflies live in a larval state for the majority of their life, and that occurs for about 1 to 2 years. Whereas adults, they only really live between about 3 to 4 weeks. I've kept a firefly in captivity alive for 36 days, and that's about the max. But mostly 2 weeks to 3 weeks, especially if it's really dry. After the adult stage, once their eggs are laid, they only live for about 3 weeks, and then they're in the larval state, and then they pupate for 3 weeks as well. And then the pupation is pretty much the end of it, and before they become an adult. And the cycle continues. Now, off to the right, you'll see an image of what looks like kind of a prehistoric creature, but that's a firefly larva that just hatched from an egg. And if you'll notice at the end of its tail, there's a region that looks a lot brighter. Now, this is a firefly larva that's glowing right from the egg. This goes back to some of the shared characteristics that I talked about in the beginning of the presentation about how juveniles and adults both need to glow. And this is an example of that happening. Off to the left is a firefly larva in the bottom left. They look kind of prehistoric, hard, bony plate kind of creatures that crawl along the ground, and they intermittently glow depending upon the time of night. And then off to the upper left is an example of a pupa that's basically pupating in between pieces of bark. So firefly habitat. All fireflies are pretty much habitat specific, with the exception of probably a few, like the common type of firefly. They love kind of warm and humid areas, forest, fields, marshes, near lakes, rivers, and streams, wetlands. Riparian corridors are one of the most important habitats for fireflies. And a riparian corridor is basically the land that occurs between the water and the rest of the land. So it's basically the interface between the water and the land. It's in that narrow strip of vegetation that occurs along a river or stream. And that's where fireflies spend you'll find most of the fireflies most of their time. And so that's only about 1% of all land occupies this particular area. And so it is of vital importance to protect that, because that's where fireflies live. So flash patterns, what's this whole business of flashing? Well, to most people, a flash of a firefly looks the same as another, but it's not. Each firefly species has its own fairly distinct flash pattern. The image off to your right shows some examples of flash patterns you might see at night. You're going to see some flashes that occur way high in the treetops, whereas some flashes will occur lower towards the ground, right above the grasses. And they'll occur in different kind of ways. They might flash every couple seconds, or they might flash one after another. And you can see some examples here, and even the type of shape that they flash varies too, whereas you see this kind of J shape off into the right-hand side. So flash patterns vary quite a number of ways. Temperature is a big one in terms of affecting firefly flash patterns. The warmer it is, the faster they'll flash. The colder it is, the slower they flash. Color can also vary as well. Different genuses have different colors. Photinus genus is more of a greenish yellow, whereas Pyractomena is more of an amber colored flash pattern. Time of night that they're active also varies as well and can influence their flash pattern. As the night wears on, males kind of get a little bit more desperate and will sometimes maybe flash a little faster. So a lot of factors go into this, but if you go out at night, think about the interval of time between flashes and then the number of flashes they're making. And if you can see differences in the flashes, then you can start to put together that you might have more than one species. So how do they choose a mate? What's this whole flashing nonsense anyway? Well, flying males broadcast signals as they search for females. And that's really their goal is males will searching for females. Females, on the other hand, are responding to various different interspecific variation in different male flash timing. And so they're looking for specific things. And a lot of times I'll ask, what do female fireflies like in male fireflies? One time I was given this presentation in Nacogdoches, Texas, and there's a woman in the front, and she piped up, and when I asked what do females like in males, and she was like, a sense of humor, and thought that was really funny. Well, I don't know if female fireflies like a sense of humor in male fireflies, but there is a woman that did some research on this, and what she discovered was that females like longer flashes or faster flash rates. And so that's kind of what they look for. Some of these can indicate a better fitness of a male. And so if it has, if the male is stronger in that way, they might be able to sire more offspring. And so these are things that have led them to prefer these particular characteristics in male flash timing. So how are fireflies helpful? Good question. Fireflies act as kind of nature's pest control. And so all the larvae are generally predaceous. If you find them, they're going to be consuming as much as they possibly can because they're rapidly growing. And they'll consume snails, earthworms, dead insects. Some fireflies even eat their own kind, such as Photuris. And that is to gain poisonous compounds that will make their eggs poisonous to predators. What is known is that they act as a really good indicator of the health of an environment. And so if you've got a rich environment that supports even the prey that firefly eat, then this can be an indicator that you've got a healthy ecosystem going on. If you lack the amount of food that they need, then there can be a lot of factors that go into this. So fireflies act as a good indicator for the health of the environment for a variety of different ways. They're also medically useful. So food safety research, cancer research, development of new drugs. They use the compounds that fireflies use to glow to kind of detect certain cancers or the presence of certain bacteria and things like that. So are fireflies disappearing? The answer to this is yes, unfortunately. I used to say that there was only kind of anecdotal evidence to support this, but now we've got some empirical evidence to kind of support this. In the coming year or two, there's going to be a firefly on the endangered species list, on the federal endangered species list. And so that is from lack of habitat, that it only occurs within like half a mile radius or something like that in New Hampshire. But what we do know is there's a lot of consensus among the public and scientific communities that there's a whole lot less fireflies than there used to be. I think a lot of people in this room might agree with that, and you might see less fireflies than you used to years ago. And there is evidence to support this now. In North America, there's around 18 species that are either threatened, classified as critically endangered, or vulnerable. So that's around 14% of all species in North America are in some ways threatened. What we do know is that there's really urgent need to protect their habitats and conservation of those habitats specifically. Once those habitats are gone, then those fireflies that are dependent upon them disappear. And what is specifically of greatest concern, especially for Texas fireflies, is the unique locally adapted species. So these are species that only occur in a certain area of Texas or in a region where it's very small. So we have a lot of fireflies that just occur in the Edwards Plateau, for example. And, you know, that's about 8 or 9 county region. And then, they don't occur anywhere else besides that. And so that's something worth protecting. So let's talk about why they're disappearing. The first one is pollution and loss of riparian corridors. This image is really apt at describing some of the threats that fireflies face. This image is taken in Del Rio, Texas, on what is known as San Felipe Springs. And it is one of the kind of most polluted spring-fed creeks in the state. There is a lot of efforts right now to clean it up. And this is an example of that right here. This person is pulling a shopping cart out of it. But what it shows is pollution, but also loss of the riparian corridor, specifically the diversity that once occurred there. If you look in the background of this image, you'll see what looks like kind of bushy plants that are kind of taking over the bank. And what this plant is called a rundo, or carrizo cane, or river cane. It's an invasive species that is not from here. And what it has created is a monoculture along this river system. Now, if fireflies occur primarily in riparian corridors, if an invader like this invasive species of plant comes along, it basically takes over. And you can imagine if you're a firefly female and you're on the ground level and a male has to flash to you, well, if you're a tiny little female and you're trying to flash to a male, there's a good chance all this vegetation is going to get in the way of those flashes. So if the male can't see the female, then they can't mate and they can't, sire more offspring. So this vegetation is literally preventing fireflies from taking residence in this habitat. Another one is habitat loss and degradation, as we talked about. There's rapid development, especially in this part of Texas where I live, clearing and stuff like that. Fireflies do occur in this area too. There are fireflies that occur in these cedar breaks and kind of live oak plateau areas. So this is another reason why they are disappearing. Light pollution is another one. The main thing for light pollution is that the ambient light, or what we call artificial light at night, gets in the way of fireflies being able to see each other. So again, a male flashing to a female and vice versa, that light gets in the way. They would have to flash a lot brighter in order to do that. I'm not really capable of doing that. So the light pollution is kind of getting in the way of that. Pesticide use is another one, specifically broad spectrum pesticides, not as much targeted pesticides. So anything that's like designed to kill like all beetles, for example, in this image over here, is going to kill a firefly. If it's going to kill a beetle, fireflies are beetles, so that will get in the way. So application of broad spectrum pesticides, specifically those ones that are water soluble, they'd get into river systems or creeks or wetlands. Those are of definite concern. Disappearing water tables is another reason as well. The reason this is an issue is that at one time in many parts of Texas, we have a lot of different aquifers here, but these aquifers used to be a lot higher in volume. And what would happen is that these aquifers would sprout seeps in like wet areas in many places where springs would come out of the rock, and either would form like a wetland area or something like that. Well, as the aquifers have been pumped, those water tables have basically started to decline, and those previously wet areas have dried up. And a lot of fireflies can just depend on like a little amount of consistent water. And so this is why we see less fireflies. This is a kind of a more I think about it, one of the more reasons that we see a lot less fireflies in certain spots. This is a big problem in Colorado and other parts into the west, where aquifer decline is quite substantial. So they're seeing less fireflies in those areas where aquifers have been drained. So how to help? Here's some ways that you can kind of assess or help fireflies recover. You can assess your soil health. So if you want to make a firefly habitat, kind of look at the soil health in your area. Poor soil equals poor habitat for firefly food, so snails and worms. And if you want to improve your soil, you can make amendments to it to introduce nutrients. And then you can lightly till your soil. The reason that's beneficial is that hard compacted soils prevent firefly larvae from kind of burrowing into the mud. And so you don't need to go too super deep, but just kind of getting a surface level will be beneficial for moisture to get further into the soil. You can avoid broad spectrum pesticides, turn out outside lights, advocate for adopting local policies to control light pollution. It's also beneficial. You can buy land to protect species. This is a great one. You can become certified. So you can certify your land as a wildlife or firefly habitat. Let log and leaf litter accumulate. Plant native grasses and trees. Grasses and forbs help retain soil moisture. Don't overmow your lawn. Start a pollinator or a garden, or help restore prairies. Who wouldn't want this picture of a prairie in their backyard? You educate your neighbors. It's also a good one. This is a Firefly Habitat Certification Program. It's the first of its kind program that I created and launched around a month ago. Signs are now available, and the certification focuses on 4 areas of importance. So cover for firefly larvae and adults, increasing plant diversity to preserve soil moisture for firefly larvae, reducing light pollution, and restricting pesticide usage. So you can visit the firefly.org website and click on Certify from the homepage, or go to firefly.org/certify to get a sign. And I'll show y'all on the website at the end of the presentation where that is. So native plants for fireflies. So when I was developing this, I kind of backed it up quite a bit, and I'll make some plant recommendations, but really we wanted to establish what our goals were, so that could inform us about making decisions going forward if we're trying to plant plants for fireflies, or modify an environment or habitat specifically for them. So our priorities here, when we're planting natives, is to provide habitat for females. So we want mating habitat, specifically diverse canopy height. So these are plants that provide, really tall vegetation, as well as short vegetation. So we want those grass clumps for fireflies to hide in. We want some taller trees to provide darkness at night. We want to provide plants that throw off a lot of leaves and leaf litter, so that that turns into soil, so that females have a place to lay eggs. We want plants that are good for larvae, so that, again, build soil and leaf litter. Places where snails and worms and soft-bodied insects can hide, and places that plants that trap moisture, so like grasses are really good for this, different forbs and those kind of things, broad leaf plants. We also want to provide operational cover for flashing adults. So this is kind of tall, deciduous and non-deciduous trees that create a dark environment. These are some good plants for fireflies, and this list is also on the website, so you can download it and go and gather it. These are plants that tend to do well in both wet and non-wet habitats. Some kind of go a little bit on one way or the other, but these are ones that have kind of been identified that I see specifically in many habitats that I visit. Kind of at the top is eastern gamma grass. These can be really great in parts of Texas that are able to support them. I find a lot of fireflies in sections of that. They create like a really dense thatch, and just they just have a nice height to them, and fireflies just love them. Inland sea oats is a great grass as well, switchgrass, Indian grass. Any grass that you find that's native to your area, that's kind of tends to be one that you find in a riparian area, can be really good too. If you can grow it outside of that, can be beneficial. Certain forbs are also beneficial: asters, frostweed, river ferns, goldenrod, siennas, late boneset. Those kind of things can be really beneficial as well. And there can be a wide variety of those. That's just a small list. These are some trees and woody plants that can be beneficial: buttonbush, sycamores, little walnut, cottonwood. Ash trees are also really great because there's different varieties of them. Dwarf palmetto is also great, sable minor. Even hackberries can be beneficial for certain species that like tree rows and stuff. Live oaks can actually provide nice habitat as well. You find many different oak trees in lots of different habitats along rivers and streams, and so it makes sense to add them to this list because they're always there. So what does firefly habitat look like in Texas? So this is kind of a journey I'll take you on about some places I've visited, and this will be a great way to just kind of see some different areas outside of your area. This is Enchanted Rock in Gillespie County. This is a picture of a kind of ephemeral stream that tends to provide a good operational cover, less habitat for females, but better for fireflies that are flying around and looking for protection and stuff like that. You'll see that this is a kind of a stream bed that is full of like small granite pieces. It's got nice vegetation on either side, a little on the drier side. You'll see a lot of prickly pear in this habitat, but you'll see some of the trees I mentioned previously, oak trees. There's some ashes and stuff in there. This is in West Texas in Fox Canyon Ranch in Jeff Davis County. This is a really protected habitat that I was lucky enough to go and see it several years ago. Off to the right, those are maple trees. So, maple trees tend to be good in certain habitats. Funny thing about this ranch, after I visited, it got bought by I think a Bitcoin millionaire or a Tesla stock millionaire, and then closed the whole thing down. And so it was quite an interesting place. This is Honey Creek in Comal County. You'll notice in this image, there's really tall cypress trees in the background. And what these cypress trees do is they create really dark habitat at night. So if I'm standing in this exact spot where this photo was taken, when I see fireflies, I will see them across the water, right where those trees are in a really super dark area. And also in there are some sable minor, dwarf palmettos, and variety of different forb species. So a really great habitat, really clear water. More of a wetland area as well, because the springs have never dried up. This is in Travis County. This is a Stewart property. This is a landowner who is part of actually NEPSOT that has spent 15 years restoring their property. I put this in here because they had brought in a lot of species of plants, and what it did was it helped create a really great firefly habitat. What's noted here is that what the landowners told me was that beforehand they used to have a lot of water in this kind of stream here. It's kind of limestone bottom stream, and that they used to have a problem with flooding. But as the kind of habitat's grown and the amount of grasses and stuff like that they put in, what happened was the water started to go down. So they have less water. But what happened is that the water that was draining into this kind of limestone like creek basically was being retained on the property from the plants. And what that did was then ended up creating good habitat for fireflies, because the moisture was able to stay on the property as opposed to wash straight down. So a great example of something that you can do and that other people are doing. So Texas fireflies, what's here? Like I said, we've got about 45 species, and these are some of the scientific names of some of the fireflies that you'll find here. I just put this here so you're aware. I'm not going to cover all of these, so don't worry. I'm just going to hit some of the major ones. But I just wanted you to know that these are some of the names. Some of these in the middle here under Photuris were actually just named a few years ago, and I'll talk about a few of those. But there's some in here that are either extinct or haven't been seen in a long time as well. So the most common type of firefly that you'll see in Texas is going to be the Photinus fireflies. These are the most commonly encountered genera in Texas, and it's about 15 to 20 species. And they cover a wide range of daytime to nighttime flying species, and includes the Big Dipper firefly, so Photinus pyralis, and they're most numerous in the early evening. Luckily in Texas, we also have the ability to see fireflies both in the spring and in the fall, just based on our climate. So we are very lucky. Places up in the Northeast, they usually get 2 to 3 weeks and that's it. But at any point in Texas, you can see a firefly, except for maybe in the month of January. So this is what Photinus pyralis looks like. This is the common firefly with a distinctive J shape that flashes kind of an upward pattern. It's got a black spot on its head. In Texas, it generally lacks that. In your area, in the Piney Woods area, you will generally only see them with this black spot, this pronodal spot here. As you get more and more west in Texas, you'll start seeing these fireflies of the same species without the black spot. Basically, they're in the process of becoming something different, but they're just not there yet. So these fireflies flash every 4 to 6 seconds. This is another species that's a little more endemic to the central Texas area and Edwards Plateau. It's called Photinus concisus. The main difference here is that they flash every 2 seconds as opposed to every 4 seconds. I'm going to show you some images, a video here. This will be really fun to watch. Just to kind of set it up, a lot of people don't know that we do have some fireflies in Texas that actually exhibit some form of synchrony. If you have heard of synchronous fireflies before, then congratulations. They're absolutely wonderful to see. And they're mostly known from the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. They're very famous there. There's been a lot of press about them. You've got to get on a wait list and give your firstborn child in order to like see them. But luckily in Texas, we do have them. And when they occur in large numbers, you can see some good synchrony. So this video is going to show some of that. So just pay attention. You're looking for as they flash at the same time. And this video was taken in Travis County in an area about last year, actually. And it's going to show Photinus concisus flashing. And you'll start to notice that as the fireflies get going, they kind of start flashing around the same time. And what's happening here is that males are basically reacting to other males and large groups. And so as one flashes, the next one flashes, and they get in these kind of synchronized assemblages of fireflies. The theory behind it is why they're doing this is that it just makes them more visible to the females and will make females more responsive. And so but we're still trying to discover why they do this. Okay, it's not wanting to advance. There we go. Okay, these are the fireflies that you saw in that video, Photinus concisus. Just wanted to give you a really good image of them, and so what they look like. You can see that they've kind of all black wing covers, large head shield. These are Photinus again, that first genera I talked about. This is what one of the females looks like. You can see she looks a lot like the male, except she's only got one light organ here and a much larger abdomen. This is another species that occurs kind of central to West Texas. These also occur up in northern Texas as well in certain spots, so you might see them, might not. They flash really fast once every second or so. It's a really tiny firefly, but it has really big light organs, and they occur in large numbers. This is what a female of that type of firefly looks like. This is a very interesting photo because this female was originally described in 1927, all right, a really long time ago. And it had never been seen or never been photographed in around 100 years until I was able to find one and get one photographed. It was a long odyssey of driving, 4 to 5 hours to Austin to get this photograph. It was quite the ordeal. But a beautiful image of this firefly. You'll notice that she doesn't have wings. She's really devoted to laying eggs. She's what's considered a larviform firefly. She has a very beautiful color. There's actually going to be a paper written on this in the next year or two that I'm collaborating on with somebody that will kind of bring a lot of this information about this firefly to light. This is a size comparison between the two I just talked about. Just a cool image just to show you the different sizes. Photuris is the other genera you'll see in Texas. You have these in your neck of the woods, kind of in the piney woods area. And I'll talk a little bit about those so you can keep an eye out. These are very complex fireflies. They are really impossible to ID based on flash pattern, dissection, or DNA analysis. You can only identify them based on a male's flash pattern. And so good luck trying to find one. I can do it, but it takes a while. And so females are very erratic. They're occurring right now, late May to late June in Texas. So this is really cool. So just a quick question, rhetorical. What is the most complicated firefly flash pattern in the United States? So I just showed you some flash video earlier, but this is what one of the most complicated flash patterns in the United States looks like. Now, this firefly specifically occurs in your area, interestingly enough. So this is something to keep an eye out for if you want to look for them. It's a firefly named Photuris waldoxi. It was named recently, just as a couple years ago. What it does is 5 flashes, a pulse, and then 2 pulses, and then another glow. So just over the top. And sexual selection has led this firefly to these really complicated flash patterns to lure in a female. We see this in the animal kingdom with like birds of paradise and other animals that go to extremes in order to attract a female. And even fireflies are showing this in some ways as well. So this firefly occurs in kind of the swampy areas and possibly in East Texas. So keep an eye out for this one. There's another species that is similar to it that has just a tad bit less complex flash pattern, and it's undecided whether the same species or not. Both researchers insist that they have something unique, and other people are like, nope, they're the same thing. But keep an eye out. If you happen to see something as complicated as this, let me know. I would love to know, and I will put you in touch with a really famous firefly researcher that would also love to know as well. This is another Photuris that occurs kind of all over Texas, called Photuris catrinae. Call them big, scary predator fireflies, but the pattern is very erratic, and they will eat other fireflies and even other insects. And they really do this in order to obtain defensive compounds that they don't make, so they can give those compounds to their eggs so they don't get eaten. This is an image of showing this firefly, kind of a stacked image, a time lapse of how it will flash throughout the night. Basically, you can see here that it's flashing over the tops of treetops and then kind of making its way around. Don't know exactly what it's doing. It might be hunting. It might be looking for a male to eat, or this might be a male looking to flash to a female. Kind of hard to say, but some are flying across the river here. We got some lighting up in the distance. So just kind of a neat image. This is another type of firefly. You're like, Ben, it's all starting to blur together. These all look the same, and I would agree with you. They tend to do this. So I don't have too much more. But this is a cool firefly that's also known to semi-synchronize its flash in this genus. And it's kind of a rare species. It does not eat other fireflies. It doesn't really have mandibles to do that. But it's called Photuris bill brown eye, and it makes a double flicker flash. So that's the thing to note. Lastly, I put this in here just because of your area of Texas. Pyractomena fireflies are ones that you will find in your area. So keep an eye out for these. These are known for their amber colored flash patterns, and they occur in single or small groups. So if you see one flying by itself in a small group, keep an eye out. They're found near water and swampy habitats, and really abundant in the eastern regions of Texas. So this is one type, Pyractomena punctiventris. It probably looks the same as the others, but you might see it's a little bit elongated. It's got a weird little like head pronotum on the top here, and it makes a amber flicker every 4 seconds or so. These are a couple other fireflies that you might find in Texas. Pleiadimus pallens over to the left. You'll notice it's got kind of a feathery antenna. And this firefly uses pheromones in order to flash. To find mates, basically. As juveniles and as adults, they do glow once they come out. But afterwards, their light kind of dims a little bit and they rely on pheromones. And then off to the right is a really unique species that was found in Cameron County, way, way south. What happened was there was this bird researcher, don't know what birds she was studying, but she decided to go to the bathroom one night, and in the bathroom, she saw this firefly and took a photo and posted it on iNaturalist. And sure enough, this happened to be a genus of firefly that hadn't been seen in Texas in over, like 40 years, basically. And so it had only been sighted 4 times since 1935. So it was kind of exciting to see this. Since Cameron County is on the border of Mexico and Texas, we don't know if this was something that flew over. I think it's maybe too far for that, but it's hard to say. And so just a neat example of some citizen science that led to some kind of illuminating information in terms of firefly diversity in the state. So if you use iNaturalist, keep posting stuff that you see. It can be very valuable, and especially for parts of the state like you live in, where it's harder to get to and there's less information. So that's it. I'll talk a little bit about the website real quick, and I just wanted to show y'all something really quickly. So thanks for joining me. Consider supporting Firefly conservation by purchasing a sign on the website or making a donation. They definitely do help. I do not make money from this, and this is not a paid gig. All of this is supported from either donations or on my own dime. So let's go ahead and this up really quick. So this is the website. Just wanted to point out where you can actually go to see the sign. Feel free to visit when you get a chance. There's some useful information on here that I update as much as I can. And there's a Firefly field guide as well that I update yearly. It's not 100% done, but we'll have some good information on Photinus. The Certify is right here, and you'll be able to go to the website, and then you can go ahead and purchase a sign. And basically, like I said, it covers different areas. This is great if you have a habitat you want to protect. Really, the benefit of the sign is basically like letting people know what to value. If they don't know fireflies are there, then they might be less concerned about what they do on that property. So this is a really great way to support fireflies in your area and show your commitment to firefly conservation. So just wanted to show this really quickly. So this is the IUCN, and normally I don't do this in presentations, but since y'all are a special group, I just wanted to kind of show you your neck of the woods. So I talked about this firefly, Photuris waldoxi. It is listed on the vulnerable species list right now with the red list, and it occurs just in this region here of Texas. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out to you guys is that you live in a state of Texas, a part of Texas that has an incredible amount of diversity. Down here in Sabine National Forest has the highest amount of firefly diversity anywhere in the state. The next to that would probably be Valverde County in near Del Rio, and then a couple other spots in between there. But this place supports more species of fireflies than anywhere else. What it is, it's kind of the convergence of a couple different regions. You've got the piney woods, and then just kind of unique habitat. So definitely keep an eye out for your area here. These are also some fireflies that you will see around the state. Some of these have gotten to names specifically. Sky Island firefly occurs in West Texas, and then the Photinus demissus also occurs up in this area, but it is also decreasing as well. So just wanted to point that out. This is a really neat website to go and discover about your local species that are either threatened or need some support. So I'm just going to go ahead and conclude with that. And then we can open it up to a few questions. If anybody's got any, please go ahead and let Belinda know.
One of the things I was wondering is there an area of Texas that where there are more plentiful diversity of fireflies, or maybe they're more endangered? So is it the Southeast Texas area where there's more forests? Is that
well
plentiful?
That's a really good question. So here's the kind of the answer to that. Most fireflies in the state now, half of them are doing really just fine. Okay, the other half are like declining quite rapidly, or declining slowly in certain areas due to development. A lot of habitats are really disappearing really fast, and it's really around a lot of urban areas specifically. So the fireflies in East Texas tend to be okay where you're at. This is a really good opportunity right now to see good fireflies in certain areas of where you're at, because it's largely mostly preserved for the most part. Other places, like in the Edwards Plateau in the Hill Country, are under really big, are under threat. Think about it too. A lot of people like to live on rivers, okay? So when they like to live on rivers, they like to build houses on rivers, all right? And the most beautiful places tend to have a lot of the most diversity. It also tends to be where people like to build stuff. So as development has come in, it has kind of destroyed a lot of habitat. A lot of these waterways have gotten polluted. So these are some of the reasons. That East Texas location I talked about in Sabine County, that is the reason I mention it, is because when I go and look at an insect collection at A&M, Texas A&M, for example, I see the most diversity there. I've studied in the Angelina National Forest as well, and there's some good diversity is there as well. But up where you guys are at, Texarkana area, there's probably some neat diversity. You just get some overlap between Oklahoma, Arkansas, all those kind of areas, and just a range there from the plains to the piney woods and so on. So the diversity in Texas starts to get a little bit more interesting once you get past like College Station. And that's when things start kind of diverging off because the habitat changes.
Okay. And the habitat's because of all the building that's going on?
Well, yeah, the destruction of the loss of their habitat specifically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like here's an example. Somebody asked me if there was fireflies in Houston, and I was like, yes, but there's only one species. And generally you won't see them very often. Houston is so overdeveloped that there's no habitat left, basically. It's all been wiped out. At one time, though, it definitely supported probably a lot of species, right? Just from its location. But there's nothing left there anymore. So I'm really speaking about that because people in Houston really want a lot of fireflies, so it's a great opportunity to build habitat for them to come back.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
So where do the larvae spend their lifetime? Are they in water or are they on land?
Okay. The question is, where do the larvae spend their lifetime? Or are they in the water or land, or where are they spending their lifetime?
They're mostly in the mud, on land. And so some species will live in between, like on a tree bark or something like that, but you'll find them underneath rocks actually. So if you go to a place and you turn over a rock, that's a great place to see them. Species or genuses like Photinus occur in the mud generally, and you have to kind of really search for them. They're kind of hard to find. Sometimes they'll occur on the top of the ground as well. They're a little harder to see. Where y'all are at with the piney woods, you'll have some glowworm species of some types that you will see on the surface, but you got to look for those.
Now, when I heard you speak in Houston, it seems like one of the things that stood out to me was that a lot of them are in the leaves that we're throwing away. The people are neat freaks and want their yards to be perfect, or throwing away a lot of the larvae. Yeah,
that's a good point, Belinda. I did speak about that. And I think the point I was making was that a lot of people in suburban areas will rake their leaves up. And so there was an example of, I was talking about compost basically. And my father actually is an organic gardener and really likes to plant plants. And one of the things he did was he collected bags of leaves from his neighbors, and he would put them on the side of his house and he'd wet them down with a hose. And what it would do is he'd start making compost essentially. And what ended up happening, interestingly enough, one day he called me, he's like, "Hey, Ben, I have some glowy things in these leaf bags." And I said, "Oh, really?" So I came over, and sure enough, there was firefly larvae in the leaf bags. And what occurred to me was that people were raking their leaves up, and what they were also doing is raking up their firefly larvae. And so we had people complaining they don't have fireflies, but really all along what they were doing was just like putting them in a bag and carting them off. And so that was a good example of like, if you've got that leaf litter, leave it or like relocate it somewhere else.
Wow, that's a good lesson. Anybody else? Okay. Good.
So like in the daytime, where would you see fireflies?
The ones that are diurnal?
The adults.
Yeah, all the adults.
Do they nectar like on the
Okay.
flowers or?
She said, in the daytime, where do you see fireflies? Are they nectaring on flowers or what?
No, they'll generally be hiding kind of in between like blades of grass or underneath a rock. A lot of times, somebody just sent me a photo of them hiding in poison ivy like a couple days ago. So you're gonna not, yeah, you'll not see them. And they generally won't nectar on flowers. They might nectar on flowers at night, but for the most part, since they live so short lives, they really don't eat much. So you'll find them in kind of low on the ground. One researcher I know goes to places and just turns over rocks and tends to find them. But look in those forbs, grassy areas, places like that.
But they're eating on like snails and worms and things like that. Is that what you're saying? And other fireflies?
The larvae are.
The larvae, okay.
Yeah. The adults generally don't eat much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't eat, and they'll take in dew, for example, and like moisture on a leaf, but that's about it.
Okay. Now, Kate's question kind of leads into one that I had. You were talking about the diurnal fireflies. I'm kind of thinking, what's the point? Are they flashing during the day? And what are they doing? Why do they exist?
Yeah, the diurnal type. So they use pheromones to find each other.
Okay.
So they don't need to flash at night. And there's certain species that will occur just during the day. It's less common to see them. Actually, in East Texas, you'll probably see them a lot more often than I will. I've very rarely seen daytime fireflies here in this part of the state. But once you get closer to the Northeast in that direction, you'll can kind of see them.
Okay, Northeast Texas or the Northeast United States?
Well, Northeast Texas, like starting in the Piney Woods area and then going, east that direction.
Okay, all right. And is there a time of night or evening when fireflies start flashing more, or is?
Good question. So you'll see them right about 15 to 20 minutes before dusk, and then it will carry on for another like hour or two. So like at this time of year, 8:15 would be good. As the summer gets later, 8:30, and it will last till about 10:30 at night or so.
Okay. We have certainly enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, great. Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight. I do appreciate it, and thanks for your support. And I hope you learned something tonight.
We did.